when the Q drop started putting God bless America and God bless Donald Trump into a lot of the posts, I was like, kind of like, okay, what the hell is going on here?
Hello, my name is Alana Torres, and welcome to EsQape, How I Left QAnon. This is a podcast where I interview ex-QAnon believers about how they got involved in QAnon and what made them get out. In our first episode, I interviewed Trevor, who I connected with in the subreddit Recovery, spelled with a Q, a forum for ex-QAnon believers. It's a community space for people to share their experiences and give each other support as they come back to reality. Trevor and I chatted a bit on Reddit, and he agreed to be interviewed by me over Zoom. Here's that conversation. I hope you enjoy. Trevor, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you giving me your time to talk about all of this.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, if you could just tell me about the time in your life when you discovered Q and what drew you to it and how you kind of fell into that, I would love to hear your story.
I got into it late of 2017, but it still seemed relatively new-ish. It seemed like it wasn't really that big of a group or that big of a movement yet. It just kind of seemed like it was like a ideology that was being spread on the internet, and I didn't really get the idea that it had been around for a while. And I was introduced to it by a member of my family, and I'd always been into conspiracy theories, and it was kind of the stuff that I liked. So I was like, yeah, this sounds interesting. There was some sort of government official that was supposedly on this insider operation where they were going to be taking down this global coalition of pedophiles, Satanists, I mean, you name it. And that's kind of when I got subjected to it. I guess I shouldn't say subjected to it, but when I was introduced to it, I was like, oh, okay, this kind of seems cool. Let me dig in here and see what I can find. And yeah, it just went on from there pretty much. I don't think like mentally I was in a bad place. I just think it caught me, and it was something I was interested in, and I just kind of fell in for it.
Okay, yeah. And when we had chatted previously, you sort of mentioned like you did think that people being isolated had something to do with that.
Oh yeah.
But you don't feel like you particularly were at the time. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I feel because at the time I felt, I would say I was pretty happy. I mean, generally I wasn't depressed, or I didn't feel like I was isolated. I think it was just something that I was interested in. But as I've kind of grown out of it, and I've kind of seen other people believing in Q, I can see how some of them are very isolated, and how it kind of attaches itself to their personalities and their mindsets and all that stuff.
Were you kind of following like the Q drops, or were you like on the periphery of like hearing about those later, or were you like in tune with all of that, I guess?
I think it was sort of a like a mixture of a bunch of that, because I didn't have the there's an app, I think, that most people who follow Q have, or there's a website, I don't remember for the life of me, but you could follow the actual drops as they were posted pretty much. But I kind of would peek my head and read a couple drops. Most of the time it was secondhand, like I would see it on Reddit, or accounts I followed on Facebook, or accounts I followed on Instagram. There I would see like, hey, here's Q's post for the day. So I wouldn't really be on the actual website where Q posted it, but I would see it secondhand through like Facebook or Instagram or Reddit.
Okay. And so which, if you don't mind saying, you don't have to like give their name or anything, but how is this family member related to you?
It is on my through my relationship that I have with my fiance.
Okay, interesting. And has she ever been following Q? It sounds like not from.
No,
Yeah.
it's she's been kind of like I had mentioned, she was sort of the one that kind of helped me kind of tether my way back to reality, I think.
Yeah.
um, she definitely played a big hand in it for sure, but the member is on her side, and they had introduced me to it, and that's how I found myself in it.
You said that they are still very much involved. Are they like trying to draw you back in at all?
I wouldn't say they're trying to draw me back in. Occasionally it'll come up in conversation, and it doesn't really go too far from that, because I think they know that I'm not into it anymore, and I think maybe that I've gone on to something else, that I've kind of gotten out of the ideology itself, and so they don't really bring it up as much, but occasionally it does, and I just kind of shrug it off. It's not like it's being constantly put on me like, hey, you have to listen to me because I know what's going to happen and you don't. Like, it's nothing like that. It's just occasionally it'll come up, and then I just shrug it off.
You and your fiance, didn't break up over it, although I've heard of a lot of relationships like
Oh
getting
yeah, for sure.
severely damaged by all of this. So if you could just talk a little bit about, yeah, how it affected your relationship, even though you're still together, like, what kind of difficulties did you have together because of it?
I when I was kind of when I was into it, probably the deepest, I would say, I would kind of mention things to her. I'd be like, hey, if we're going here, we should probably be on the lookout, for something like this to happen. I've read how on like Reddit, on certain subreddits, that it's actually made people angry, like actual Q believers, when they tell their significant other what's going to happen and then they don't want to listen to them, it makes them mad. But I guess when I noticed that she wasn't into it as much as me, it never really frustrated me. It never made me angry. I was just like, I kind of had that mindset like, okay, well, I know what's going to happen, so I'll be ready for it when it happens. So when it does, I'll be prepared, and then I'll help her. That's kind of the mindset that I had.
Okay. And yeah, so what kind of things would you tell her that, maybe you should be on the lookout for or be prepared for? What were some of these things?
Well, there was a year we went to a concert in Chicago, and I was like, hey, because I think around that time period, it was we went there in 2018, I believe, and uh, I want to say there was like some sort of a Q drop that was talking about something that was going to happen in Chicago, and I was like, hey, we should probably be on the lookout for this. Like, hey, this might happen. I think it was going to be like somebody gets arrested or something,
Interesting.
and it was, and maybe they were talking about, hey, like something bad could happen from this. I don't really remember exactly, but I do remember telling her like, hey, we should be careful when we're there because this could happen. And she's just like, yeah, whatever. Pretty much. So
Tell me a little bit about coming out of it and the things that drew you away from Q and why.
it was really weird because um, I've never really had the feeling of being brainwashed in my life and having this kind of this mindset of narrow thought, I guess. I would say probably early 2019 was when I was starting to realize that, okay, maybe something's not right here, because one, Q's been talking about things that are supposed to happen and none of them have happened whatsoever. So like, okay, one, there's empty comments and lies and all that, and I was like, something's probably going on here that is more than just what I can see. And when the Q drop started putting God bless America and God bless Donald Trump into a lot of the posts, I was like, kind of like, okay, what the hell is going on here? I mean, I can't consider myself a person who follows Trump, and nor
Yeah.
was I ever a Trump supporter. So when stuff like that started happening, I was like, okay, something's really going on here. Because I had the impression when I first got into it that there was this government group that was going after the evil, corrupt people in our administration and in administrations around the globe. And I was like, this is cool because, one, it's believable, and two, I was like, I can get behind this. Hell yeah, like let's get rid of these fucking sickos. But
Of course, yeah.
but at the same time, I just when I started seeing that they were including Trump and kind of they weren't putting him at the tip of the spear, but he was definitely a part of the spear itself. And that was one of the first steps that I recall was like, okay, maybe this isn't good for my head. Maybe this isn't good for my mindset. And yeah, it pretty much, I would say, started with there, and then having um, my fiance kind of speak to me about it on several occasions, like, hey, it wasn't really like any in-depth conversations that we had, but she was just like, I could tell that it was bugging her that I believed this. And being empathetic that I am, I noticed it, and I was like, why am I believing in something that makes her feel upset? Like I want to, I mean, she's my fiance and I love her and I want to do what's best for her and I want to make sure that she's okay. So why am I following this path that I know is hurting her in some way? And that was sort of what began to kind of lead me back out of it. And then, as I had said, I had two family members pass away in May of 2019, and that really kind of did like a shock to my system, I think, and it really kind of helped bring me back, I'd say.
Okay. Well, yeah, my condolences about that. That sounds horrendous, to have to experience two in 1 month. Um, I guess a little bit in our chat, you had mentioned Bohemian Grove, I think it
Hmm.
was. And I listened to a podcast a little bit about that, just to try to get a little more background information.
Sure.
And I guess maybe, so, okay, so within the Q followers online, so they particularly believe that anyone involved in that is like, satanic, or they're
I'd say so.
participating in the child trafficking ring, correct? And all
Oh
that
yeah.
stuff. Okay. Um, and yeah, I guess one thing that, yeah, stood out in the podcast, that I listened to about it was that Donald Trump has never been invited to it.
Right.
And so I guess that's maybe partially like some fuel for like them elevating him. But what else do you think is a part of making him like this savior when there's so much evidence, I don't know, of him being like a shady businessman and like
Right.
him publicly hitting on his daughter pretty much,
Right. Yeah.
being associated with Jeffrey Epstein. So what are the things that would be talked about that makes him some kind of savior?
Well, from what I recollect and what I remember the most is that he was only friends with Epstein because he was, and it's going to sound really far-fetched because it is a really far-fetched theory, but he only was friends with him because he was trying to get on the inside and basically work as, like, for lack of a better word, a secret agent pretty much. And so the reason that would be one of them. Another one, I just think he's really good at manipulating people, and I think he has a way of speaking that really entrances certain people. And because I mean, you can watch a rally of his and just be completely transfixed by the things that he says because, like, why, like, who in their right mind would say these things in front of like thousands of people? Like, I think people really connect with that because one, he's an outsider, and two, he says what he wants to say and he doesn't care. And there's a lot of Americans that really, really like that, I think. And I think they like the fact that he doesn't hold back his punches and all this stuff. And I don't know why exactly Q has sort of projected him in this light as being some prophet or some messiah of some kind, because there is evidence on every street that you turn down that he's done something wrong. Yet people are like, "Oh, he's done bad things, but he's going to save us. He's going to help us," you know. And it's, I don't know what it is. It might be some sort of like religious kind of psychology that has to play with it. I don't know. When I was into it and I started seeing that they were kind of raising him up on a pedestal, I was like, this is kind of weird. Like this is cult stuff here, and I'm not a big fan of this. So
There just seems to be a certain disconnect of like within Q and like just Trump supporters generally with being able to ignore any bad stuff or any bad evidence about him.
right.
And I'm wondering what that is about, or like how that happened, or what this fervent, yeah, I don't know, just this really intense want to make him this like divine being. Because yeah, I guess I'm seeing that it's popping up in like Christian groups as well, or even at church.
Right.
I listened to a certain podcast, or I think it was actually Endless Thread. No, it was Reply All, where they were talking to some listeners, and someone called in and he was talking about how like this administration has changed the way they do work in church, because so many people now come in like responding to the different sermons saying like, oh, you're just like feeding us like liberal garbage, you know.
Whoa.
And like, you know, they might be interpreting something that just happened in like current events, and then, you know, do what they do in church to you know, kind of make it relevant. But like, I'm an atheist as well, I guess I should say. But yeah, like they've noticed that a lot of church goers have come in and now they're saying like, you know, all this stuff you're saying is just liberal, like you're just spewing back, you know, the liberal media talking points, which is like really alarming. I think you mentioned that you noticed a lot of Christians, or at least you said you didn't notice anybody calling themselves out as atheists.
Yeah,
So,
I would say that a majority of the Q demographic is, they believe in some sort of God, I would say. And if I had to, I guess, generalize it, I would say they believe in the Christian God. And I don't know why that is. I really don't. I think Q has sort of kind of made a jury rig kind of a way of roping those kind of people in by doing the same thing that Christianity does to people too. I mean, I think that these people who are believers in Christianity, they might not even believe it to a radical degree, but I think to some extent they believe that eventually when the world gets bad enough, some savior is going to come down and help them. And I think Q uses that same thing to promote Donald Trump as being that savior, and he's not.
Yeah, I'm just blown away at like how he became the savior.
Yeah, I wish I could. I wish I could explain to you how it sort of brainwashed me, but I don't know. It was kind of like oh, I'm gonna read a couple of these things here, and then the next day I was like, okay, I guess he's gonna save the country, I suppose. Like it wasn't sort of a gradual thing. I felt, I was like, okay, yeah, he's the guy. He's gonna help us out, and we're gonna be all right.
That's fascinating. So like, yeah, you hadn't supported him prior to learning about Q. I mean, like, did you ever consider yourself a Trump supporter, like after kind of falling into that?
No, in 2016 I was a Bernie guy, surprisingly. And um I I definitely feel like I started to adopt that mindset of my friends would be like, well, he's done this and this is terrible. This is god awful. And I'll be like, well, yeah, but he's gonna save us too. So like, it's okay, you know. Like I didn't disregard the fact that he was a bad guy, but I was putting the idea out first that he was going to save us. And I think a lot of Q supporters believe the same way, is that you could show them a picture of him in a room with a woman and they're having sex, and it's legitimate proof that he's done some god awful things. You could show it to them and they would be like, yeah, but he's going to save us, so it's okay, you know. Or they would reply like, oh well, we've all done bad things. To
Wow.
that degree, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't.
Sure. Okay. I guess going back a little bit, because we just talked about like Christianity and Trump supporters
Mhm.
just briefly, but I guess, the link to it all, I guess, is children, right? So like there are a lot of single issue voters out there who voted for Trump just because they perceive him to be pro-life. I guess he is pro-life. Um, and they'll disregard any other issue just to vote for the pro-life ticket.
Right.
And with QAnon and I guess this child trafficking angle, the whole save the children thing that's happening, I guess that can easily be wrapped together.
Oh,
It's
for sure.
like children have been going missing for a long time, and it's also kind of curious that this has become such a hot topic like now, like very recently. um,
Right.
okay, I guess I'm curious, like in our messages back and forth, you had mentioned like, there's lots of different layers. You could talk about this for hours, but like, is there anything like that stands out for you, one of those threads that like you could go down a rabbit hole with and in discussion? Like we obviously won't spend hours talking,
Right.
but
Right.
like, yeah, are there just certain things that maybe you and I haven't chatted about yet that really stand out about your experience or about, your time just being involved?
I would say the most damning evidence that I was given when I was more into Q was the the kids, pretty much. I mean, I had started seeing the posts of Epstein's Island, and I started going down that thread of they would take young girls there and do all sorts of terrible, horrendous things to them. And that's what I remember sticking out to me the most, because I was like, this is terrible. Like I remember thinking to myself, like, this is just atrocious. This is a crime literally against the human spirit. Like, this is terrible. And that's one of the things that I remember being a very strong sword in my fight, I guess, for Q, is that, well, we're going to save all these kids and we're going to bring them back to the parents, or we're going to get justice for them. Like, that's what I think really got to me the most, because I'm empathetic to begin with, and just knowing that kids are being hurt out there is, it's really, really, really saddening. And that's one of the things that stuck out to me the most. But I think that they're only pushing it now because he needed more votes to win re-election, and I think that's what the Save the Children thing was all about with Q. And they were trying to basically hijack the actual movement that's being, done across the country and across the world, where actual people are going out there and actually helping people reunite with their kids. And yeah,
Wow.
I just
So you think that happened to get Trump more votes?
oh yeah, I'd say so.
Really?
I
Is that what
don't
you saw in discussion or?
well, I mean, I can't say I saw it in discussion, but if I had to suggest my own personal opinion in my own personal belief, I would say that, because when I look at the conservative party in America, I don't see people who are pro-lifers. And I think the only way that they were because they knew that they were going to lose, so they wanted to get more votes, but they didn't know how. So I think some way they used it and they pushed it out to try to get people to vote for Trump again, or people that didn't vote for him in 2016 but need to vote for him this year. I think it was definitely used. Whether or not it was actually used, that's beyond me, but if I had to take a wild guess, I would say so.
Interesting. Okay. Now with this whole mess of like Trump not wanting to concede,
Hmm.
do you think, and I mean, are you like at all just like peeking in to see like what's happening now with any of these threads of Q followers? Like, I don't know. I guess I'm wondering like if they might mobilize or something like that.
I still do from time to time. It's really hard to find um Q groups now on Facebook and Instagram after a lot of the bans took place, and on Reddit too. I mean, you can't really find any Q groups. You can find maybe a handful, but that's about it.
Mhm.
And they don't really post too often. But from what I've dipped back into, obviously, with Parler, that new app being promoted very, very strongly with conservatives and other people who believe in Q. I wouldn't say that Parler is a hotspot for Q activity, but it definitely goes on there. And I think a lot of people who have accounts on Parler are definitely on the same side as Q. They might not know about Q, but they're definitely on the same side, because Q promotes this idea that the Democrats are evil, the liberal agenda is going to destroy American values, this and that. And a lot of these people who are on this app think the same way. And they think, well, if we can just, start hurting or killing Democrats once a week or whatever, we can really get some changes done in this country. And I think I was actually starting to watch a podcast. I think it was called The Second American Civil War or something like that by Robert Evans, I want to say.
Mhm.
I started watching that, and he had made I think he made it last year, but he talked about how the idea of a civil war could come out of this movement, not just the Q movement itself, but just the polarization that has happened
Right.
with all kinds of different things. I personally believe that they won't mobilize. Um, they definitely have the manpower and the firearms to do so, but it's hard for me to see it. I think if they were to do it, it would take a lot. It would take a really, really big event. I don't even think if Trump loses again, I think if he loses again, there might be some outrage. I think maybe there'll be I could see there be like a bomb going off someplace. Maybe that's about it. But I really don't see them mobilizing to that degree. I think we're quite a few years away from that to some degree. I do think though that if this Q thing does go on and continues to go on, I think there will be some sort of Jonestown event where they just, or Heaven's Gate, where it'll be a mass suicide. I wouldn't say I'm sure of it, but I could definitely foresee it.
Like, okay, you could see it going that way.
Oh yeah.
And is that just because of like how devoted these people are, or like what makes you say that?
I would say one, of devotion, and two, because it seems like the goalpost gets moved every time that Q posts. It says, okay, for an example, I think it was actually the first Q post, um, was like Hillary Clinton was going to be arrested, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
National Guard gets activated, so
Right.
on and so forth. It was something along those lines. And it's now November 18th of 2020, and she's still not in prison. So the goalpost keeps getting moved. And I think once enough people start to realize that the goalpost keeps getting moved, they're going to lose interest, or maybe there will be some misguided activity that comes in, and I think somebody new will step up in the Q community, and somebody who will be more or less taking the role of like a religious figurehead, kind of like a cult leader, I would say, because right now Q doesn't necessarily have a physical embodiment of a leader except for Donald Trump. So when Donald Trump loses again, and he either gets indicted or goes to prison or he leaves the country, Q's not going to have a guy left in their fight, and they won't have a leader. So if I were to just take a random guess, I would say that somebody who is a very strong voice in that community would step up in place of him and then take charge of the movement itself. And I think they would either mobilize and there would be some conflict, or it would be like a Heaven's Gate, Jonestown type event, which I would much rather see the Jonestown event rather than a civil war, because nobody wants a war in the country.
Yeah.
I sure as hell don't.
No, of course not. I mean, it would be unfortunate either way, but yeah, it's, I guess, you'd rather people maybe just inflict violence upon themselves rather than others.
Kind of scary to think about. It is. It really is, because to me, after leaving kind of the echo chamber of Q, I kind of look back in at them, and it's not that I'm angry at these people. It's just I feel really sad because they're only seeing what they want to see, and everything that's taking place outside of their cone of viewpoint it just doesn't matter to them. And you could tell them the truth and they wouldn't believe you, because it's not their truth. Their truth is what Q says.
Yes.
And
like, why do you think no one is noticing the goalposts getting moved, or why are they ignoring that?
Like you mentioned, like Hillary Clinton has never been arrested, and that was the first claim that was made. So like, why isn't anybody looking at that and saying, hey, like, maybe we're just in a weird rabbit hole here?
There's got to be some sort of psychological element that's taking place. If I had to just say on behalf of myself, and what I believed when I guess when I wasn't noticing these goalposts being moved, I was just telling myself that it's all part of the plan, and everything is going according to plan, and everything's going how it should go. It's just going to take time. So I think it was kind of a facade that was put in front of my face, like, hey, I know we said this, but it's going to happen eventually. It's all part of the plan. We just got to be patient. And I think that's, again, why I believe it to be such reminiscent of an actual cult, because a lot of cults that have happened through American history have all been, for example, Waco. When Waco happened, I can't think of his name, David Koresh, he had told his followers, like, well, this is going to happen. Judgment Day is coming, blah, 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 blah. And I think just by moving the goalposts, keep going backwards, as long as they were there with him, the man who they believed was the prophet, everything would be okay. Like, it didn't matter if it happened at the time period that he said it would. It only matters that they're on the right side of the fight, pretty much, is what I got from it. It's like, I didn't really care if Hillary Clinton got arrested on a certain day. I only cared that I was going to be on the right side of the war that was going to happen, or is supposedly going on right now.
Sure. And so would you say that, like, all right, so Hillary Clinton hasn't been arrested yet, but I guess are people still expecting that that's going to happen?
I would say so, yeah. Like I said, I haven't gone too far back into Q, but occasionally I do kind of like peek my head back in the room and like, hey, what's going on, guys? But it still seems like they're holding out for this hope that there's going to be this just mass arrests of all these people that have done wrongs against humanity, and they do still very well believe that this is all going to happen, and again, it kind of, to some degree, it confuses me because it's been, it's 2020 and nothing's happened yet. I mean,
Right.
I that's why I guess I can kind of compare it so much to a cult, because it's just what it feels like. I mean, you have a leader and then you have the members, and the leader says this and then it doesn't happen, and then the members are like, okay, what do we do now? And it's the same thing. I mean, it may not be the same thing, but there's definitely some parallels that are drawn to it. But social media definitely has a big play in how it spread too, I would say.
Sure. Okay, so like when you were like in the height of your belief in it, how did it make you feel? Like, was it kind of a thing of like knowing stuff that other people didn't know? Did that make you feel good? Or like, yeah,
Yeah.
you
Oh
remember how
yeah.
it felt and what felt good about it?
Yeah, it was definitely I wouldn't say it was like a high by any means, but it was definitely like a feeling of endorphins, being like, okay, well, nobody else knows what's going to happen, but I know what's going to happen. And then when it does happen, I'll be ready. And it was, I think it's the same mindset that a lot of Q people have, is that they believe that they know the future and they know what's going to happen and they know the day it's going to happen. And it makes it dangerous, because when you have these empty promises unfulfilled, then they don't know where to turn to. And it seems like, and I could be wrong, but it seems like when humans don't know really where to turn to, violence oftentimes spreads. And especially with a movement like this, it's very, very, very dangerous, because you have a very large group of people who have very strong beliefs about this. And anybody who opposes those beliefs are either the enemy or they're not red pilled yet, basically. And so if it was like worst case scenario, if this movement got into a national conflict, you would I would say that you would have Q taking people that are not Q believers and either killing them or trying to convert them.
Wow.
And that'd be like worst case scenario, like
Sure.
absolute worst case scenario. Like, I can't see it being probable, but if I were to try to label it as like, hey, this is probably the worst of the worst that could come from this, I would say that's um, that way. Because I mean, I'm sure that you and I both have seen what people are capable of, especially in today's political climate and everything that's been going on right now. If even Biden supporters and Trump supporters, I mean, it's chaos. It's terrible. I mean, there's no communication going on, and I think that's what's making it so um, flourishing to spread, is that you're either on this side or you're either on this side, and that's the main focal point of Q's, I guess, fantasy war, is that you're either good or you're evil, and they don't believe that there's a gray area, and there always is. There's always people that are kind of caught in the middle, and that's what's scary, to
Yeah,
me at least.
sure. Yeah, we're in a particular time in our country where, yeah, we can't agree on what truth is,
Right,
despite maybe even having well documented evidence.
right.
Yeah, and that's really alarming. If you were to talk to a Q supporter now who's like really in the throes of it, what would you say to them?
um wow, that's a well, I would I would say, I guess, to kind of take a step back, one of the more, I guess, one of the other most troubling aspects about it is how they've falsely accused celebrities and people of public interest of being Satan worshipers and pedophiles, and when they're not. And some real harm can come to them. And that's another thing that troubles me too. But if I had to, I guess, say anything to a Q supporter, I'd just tell them that I know not everybody has a family, but if they were to be a Q supporter that has a family, that there's a world that exists outside of their echo chamber, and their family's there and waiting for them, and they love them. And this world that's been built by some internet phenomenon is not the real world. There might be some essence of truth to it in some parts, but it's not enough to build this alternate reality where we have a war between good versus evil. I mean, you can like go to your local Walmart and just walk around and look at people. Like we're just normal people. We're just doing our thing. I mean, there's like we're not fighting no like demons and all that stuff. Like we're just people trying to figure out what the hell to do right now, because there's so much confusion going on, and with the pandemic and the election stuff going on, people are scared, and we're all just tired. And I think this talk of war and fighting and killing people is just it's tiresome, and it's just not worth it. I think we all just need to take a step back and go see family, go see friends, find something in your life that's positive and not negative, because it seems like all this Q stuff is just negative, and it doesn't seem like it's doing anyone any good, because I've never seen anything good, anything positive pushed out into the universe from this group, from this movement. I mean, it just seems like it's all we got to go take the streets and we got to kill these people and drag them out, and it's just chaos. And I don't think that's what we need right now. I think we need love and conversation and great communication skills, and we need to learn to meet halfway sometimes, and not just stand on our polarized hills and scream at the sky, because it's not going to do anything. I think we need to join together and figure it out, because fighting about it's not going to do anything.
And if you said all of that to a Q supporter, do you think they would listen?
Well, I would only hope that it would be somebody who's still on the fence. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this, is because I'm not trying to convert, Q believers back to reality. I want at least somebody to see it and just think about it from a different perspective. Because when your beliefs are down one train of thought, that's all you see. But if you subject yourself to looking at it or hearing about it from a different perspective, it opens up your mind to thinking about things differently. And I only hope that I could just help somebody who's still on the fence about it, or maybe trying to get out of it but are still not sure. Like I don't know. I think the more extreme ones would probably say that I'm part of the liberal demon rat agenda that's trying to destroy American values. But I would like to think that the more relaxed ones would be able to commit to a conversation.
Right. So basically, the hope is just to get people to have an open mind and be open to at least hearing this.
Yeah, because most of them don't want to hear it and they don't want to believe it. So like I had said, if I could help anybody, I'd like to help the ones that aren't too far down the rabbit hole yet.
Well, thank you so much, Trevor, for joining me today. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
And I hope you have a great day, and I'll send you something with this once I have it ready.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for
All right.
letting me share.
Of course.